There are wounds that don't bleed, words that can destroy a life. But there are also moments, just one moment, that can change everything. Isabel Cruz was once a humble middle school art teacher living in a low-income neighborhood. She loved with her whole heart, believed with blind faith, and held on to the hope that one day love and patience would be rewarded. But life doesn't always unfold the way we imagine. Sometimes people throw away the most beautiful things because they're too shallow to see their worth. Isabel was abandoned by her husband while carrying twin sons. No warm goodbye, no final embrace, just a cold sentence, "You are nothing." He, Nathan Hale, a tech entrepreneur, once at the height of success, invited his ex-wife to his new wedding, not out of love, but to humiliate her. But he had no idea that the woman he once called worthless had turned her pain into power. And that woman? She wouldn't just walk into the wedding. She would arrive like a storm of grace with two sons by her side, sons he never dared to claim. This isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of rebirth, of a woman thrown away who rose again, not to make him suffer, but to prove that no one, no man gets to define her worth, but her. The wall clock ticked towards 6 p.m. in the small kitchen, bathed in golden candlelight. Isabel Cruz carefully set the dinner table, as if it were the most important evening of her life. The scent of buttered toast lingered in the air, and the flickering candles danced in her hopeful eyes. Tonight, she would tell Nathan the most miraculous news of her life. She was pregnant. Not just one child, but two, a pair of twins. She adjusted her hair, slipped on the simple red dress he once complimented. Her hand rested gently on her belly. All her worries melted away with the thought of sharing this joy with the man she loved. The door creaked open. Nathan walked in. No smile, no greeting. He tossed his keys on the counter, his eyes distant and cold. "You're home," Isabel whispered, voice trembling with anticipation. "I have a surprise for you." He said nothing, poured himself a glass of wine and sat down. "We need to talk." She sat across from him, uneasy. "What is it?" Nathan looked her dead in the eye without hesitation. "Isabel, this marriage was a mistake. You don't belong in my world. You have nothing, no background, no potential, no value. I'm tired of pretending otherwise every single day." Her heart clenched. "Nathan, I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." He let out a mocking laugh. "Don't think I'm going to fall for that cheap stunt. That child isn't mine, and even if it were, I don't care." The room turned ice cold. The scent of toast vanished. So did the light in her eyes. "I want you out, tonight," he said, rising. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Isabel froze. Years of dreams, built hopes, collapsed in a few brutal sentences. She didn't cry. The pain was too heavy for tears. She just watched him walk away, step into the bedroom, and close the door, like she had never existed. That night, she packed a small bag and walked out of the house she once called home, carrying a shattered heart and two unborn lives. Spring rain fell over the city like sorrow pouring from the sky. Isabel stood still before the iron gate of what used to be her home. No suitcase, no umbrella, just shivering hands and a pounding heart. Inside her, two tiny lives were just beginning, and she had no idea where to go. She had left when Nathan told her to, but after nearly an hour of aimless walking, with the rain growing heavier and the city swallowing her whole, she turned back. There was still one small spark of hope left inside her. Maybe, just maybe, if he saw her like this, drenched, alone, still carrying his child, he would soften. She pressed the doorbell, once, then again. The porch light flickered on, the door opened. Nathan appeared, tired-eyed, a glass of wine in hand, still wearing the same white shirt from earlier. "Isabel?" he said, without much surprise. She stepped forward, voice trembling. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't know what to do." "I was clear," he sighed. "We're done. Why are you here?" "I'm pregnant, Nathan," she whispered, tears mixing with rain on her chin. "It's your child." He frowned, as if weighing guilt against inconvenience. But then, cold and certain, he said, "I don't believe you. And even if it's true, I don't want to be involved. I gave you a chance to leave with dignity." "Just one night," she pleaded. "You don't have to do anything, just let me stay." He shook his head, sipping his wine. "Isabel, don't make this worse. You've always been this weak. That's why I couldn't stay." She stood frozen. All warmth vanished. Every memory of love turned to dust. The door closed. Not with a slam, just a soft click, crueler than a scream. Isabel turned away, the rain beating down like punishment. She wandered the sidewalks, wind slicing her skin, clothes clinging to her bones. The city blazed with lights, but no one saw her. No one asked if she was okay. By midnight, she found a shabby motel off a side street, a faded sign flickering in the dark. The owner, a middle-aged woman, eyed her and asked, "You got money?" Isabel pulled out a few crumpled bills, the week's pay from substitute teaching at a community arts center. The woman nodded. "Small room, second floor, no heat." "As long as it has a roof," Isabel whispered. She entered the room, damp, smelling of bleach. But to her, it was heaven. She sat at the edge of the bed, curled into herself, one hand on her still flat belly. Her eyes staring into the dark. "My baby," she whispered. "I have nothing left except you." 4 months after the night she was cast out, Isabel Cruz lived in a cramped attic room of a decaying apartment building. No heater, no air conditioning, just a broken-legged bed, a squeaky fan, and restless sleep interrupted by pregnancy cramps. She was in her 7th month. Her belly had grown heavy. Every step was a struggle, but she wouldn't let herself fall. By day, she taught part-time art lessons at a youth center. By evening, she served tables at a small diner. At night, she cleaned an office building when the city was fast asleep. She had no close friends in this city. The only family she had was her sister living states away, but Isabel refused to ask for help. She had been discarded once, and now she wanted to rise again on her own. One cold, rainy night, while mopping the 10th floor of a finance company, Isabel felt a sharp, sudden pain in her lower back. She assumed it was exhaustion. Then, her water broke. A panicked security guard called 911. She was rushed to the hospital in preterm labor at just 34 weeks. Under the sterile white lights and humming machines, she could only say one thing when the doctor asked if she had any family. "I only have my babies. Please, save my babies." 2 hours later, Luca and Elias entered the world, tiny, fragile, but alive. They were placed into incubators. Isabel collapsed from exhaustion, drifting in and out of consciousness as tears soaked her pillow. Not from pain, but from knowing her children had survived and that they had entered this world alongside her fight. She awoke the next morning, blurry-eyed and weak. A nurse leaned over gently and said, "They're both stable, but it'll be a long stay in NICU." Isabel clenched her fist. She looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "I won't give up. Not for anyone else, but for 2 little pairs of eyes waiting behind a NICU glass. For 2 heartbeats, her last remaining hope in this world." Every morning, Isabel Cruz pushed open the glass doors to the neonatal intensive care unit, walking toward the 2 incubators as if it were the holiest ritual of her day. Luca and Elias, her tiny angels, grew stronger with each delicate breath. She sang lullabies while they still needed ventilators. She read stories before their eyes could open. And when one of them wrapped a tiny hand around her finger for the first time, Isabel knew she was no longer the woman who had been left behind. She was a mother, and that was enough to begin again. 3 weeks later, when the twins were discharged, Isabel held them in her fragile arms and returned to the attic room, where nothing waited but 3 hearts beating in harmony. Unable to maintain 3 jobs, Isabel gave up her night janitorial shift. Instead, during the baby's naps, she pulled out her sketch pad. She drew their tiny faces. She captured dreams not yet spoken. One day, while picking up medicine at the local community clinic, she overheard a woman wishing for a portrait of her family to hang in the living room. Isabel stepped forward, hesitant but hopeful. "I could try drawing it if you'd like." That portrait, a family with 3 kids and an old dog, moved the woman to tears. "You should sell your work," she said. "There are so many people who need something this warm." From that moment, Isabel began taking orders through social media. At first it was friends, then friends of friends, then strangers. She named her page Cruz Creations. Within 8 months, she'd saved enough to move out of the attic and into a sunlit, cozy apartment with a little balcony. Luca and Elias grew up surrounded by love and watercolor skies. Every night, they sat beside her, helping place stamps on mailing boxes, giggling when she called them the best little assistants in the world. And it was in those moments, amid the scent of paper and children's laughter, that Isabel realized she didn't need to look back. She was painting a new future, one stroke, one color at a time, with the same hands that once trembled, now steadier than ever. One late autumn afternoon 4 years ago, while Isabel was wrapping art prints for shipping, Luca burst into the house holding a thick, gold-trimmed envelope. "Mom, you got a letter. It looks really fancy." She wiped her hands and took the envelope, curious. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Her heart skipped a beat. "Nathan Hale." She opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation, embossed, elegant, accompanied by a handwritten note. "Thought you'd like to see how some of us recover from our mistakes." No greeting, no explanation, just arrogance wrapped in silk. Nathan was getting married to a woman from high society, his perfect ending, and he wanted Isabel, the woman he once called worthless, to witness it. She sat in silence for a few minutes. No anger, no sadness, just a slow, meaningful smile. He still thought she was the same woman he abandoned. He had no idea that the person he left behind didn't just survive. She had grown, flourished, and succeeded in ways he could never imagine. She stepped into her son's room. "Boys, want to go to a wedding?" The twins looked up, puzzled. "Whose wedding?" "Nathan's," she said calmly. Elias squinted. "That name sounds familiar." "He's your father," Isabel replied without hesitation. Silence. Then Luca asked, "Why are we going?" She knelt, placing a hand gently on their shoulders. Not to be angry, not for revenge, just to remind someone what they chose to walk away from. That night, she sat before her mirror, bathed in warm yellow light. She was no longer the girl who once cried herself empty in a kitchen years ago. She was a woman who knew exactly who she was. This time, she wouldn't arrive with her head down. She would walk in as living proof of everything he could never have again. The wedding took place in one of the city's most luxurious hotels, where crystal chandeliers dripped like waterfalls of light and classical music floated from a live orchestra in the corner. Guests arrived in floor-length gowns and tailored tuxedos. Champagne sparkled in delicate flutes, and the name of the groom, Nathan Hale, was spoken with pride, as if he were the center of the universe. And then the main doors opened. Everything paused. Isabel Cruz stepped inside, not rushing, not hesitating. She wore a stunning emerald green gown, the fabric flowing with her every move. Her hair swept into a graceful updo, a few golden strands framing her face. On either side of her, she held the hands of 2 young boys in perfectly fitted tuxedos, Luca and Elias. Miniature reflections of the man now frozen in the center of the ceremony. No one in the room knew who she was, but no one could look away. Guests murmured, "Who is she, an actress? A designer?" Isabel didn't answer. She just smiled, softly but powerfully. She walked down the aisle, every step like its own musical phrase. Luca and Elias kept perfect pace, poised and upright. 2 boys who needed no validation, no approval. She stopped near the front row. That was when Nathan's eyes, those proud, calculated eyes, locked onto hers. His heart skipped a beat. Not from love, from fear. She stood there, the embodiment of everything he had once rejected. His fiancée, Stephanie, frowned. "Do you know her?" Isabel turned gracefully and nodded. "Hello, Stephanie. I'm Isabel, the mother of these two boys." Her gaze shifted to Nathan. "And the woman he walked away from while I carried them inside me." Silence fell over the room. No one laughed. No one breathed. Then Isabel continued calmly. "He once said I was nothing, so today I didn't come to interrupt. I came to remind him what he gave up." And with that she turned and walked away, leaving behind 100 stunned faces and a groom who could no longer remember how to speak. The ballroom remained frozen in silence after Isabel's powerful words, but she hadn't yet reached the exit when Stephanie's voice sliced through the air. "Stop." Isabel paused, turned around, calm, unwavering. "He's their father?" Stephanie stared at Nathan, suspicion sharp in her eyes. "Is that true?" Nathan looked around. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. 100 eyes were locked on him. She's making it up," he stammered. "She's just trying to stir up drama." "He had a family once," Isabel said evenly. "He chose to walk away." Stephanie stood frozen. She knelt to look at Luca and Elias eye to eye, and no DNA test was needed. The resemblance was undeniable. "They look just like you," she whispered. She turned slightly. "Luca, Elias, do you have something to say?" The boys didn't hesitate. Luca took half a step forward, chin raised, voice firm beyond his years. "We don't need you." Elias followed, steady and sure. "We have our mom, and she's strong enough for all three of us." Silence blanketed the room. Then, slowly, a single clap. Then another and another, until the room filled with a rising tide of applause. Not for drama, but for truth, spoken through the innocence and strength of two boys. Stephanie took a step back. She stared at Nathan as if seeing him for the first time. "You could lie to me, but you can't lie to the truth. I will not marry a man who abandoned his children and built his future on a lie." She pulled off her ring, held it tightly for a second, then placed it gently on the table. For all to see, the wedding was over. While Nathan stood frozen in place, a wave of murmurs swept through the guests. One voice rose. "Isn't that Isabel Cruz, the woman who runs Cruz Creations? I hired her for my firm's art showcase last spring." Another added, "She's the single mom Forbes featured last year, won Entrepreneur of the Year." The air shifted. Admiring glances turned toward Isabel, and Nathan now stood in the eye of the storm. Nathan stood frozen, gripping the ring. But it was too late. Investors began to leave. A state senator who'd supported him walked out in silence. The world Nathan built with pride was unraveling by the second. Luca reached up and held his mother's hand. "Mom, can we go now?" Isabel bent down and kissed his forehead. "Of course. I think we've said enough." And so they walked away, unhurried, unshaken. Behind them, the empire Nathan once ruled began to crack, piece. 3 months after the wedding disaster, Nathan Hale lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment, its walls peeling and the ceiling leaking rain. The neighborhood was quiet and worn down, a far cry from the mansions, champagne galas, and exclusive circles he once called home. There were no voices calling his name. No applause, no flashing lights, no empty praise. Only a creaky wooden chair, a cold cup of coffee, and a man staring at his reflection, unable to recognize the person staring back. He had lost everything. His company was pulled from projects, investors backed out, bank accounts frozen to pay off legal debts. The board ended his contract with a single, curt email. But the greatest pain wasn't in the material things he'd lost. It was watching Isabel on television, standing center stage at a national arts conference, strong and radiant, a symbol of rebirth. She spoke about how art could heal and empower children. Her voice was calm, firm, free of resentment. Behind her, Luca and Elias smiled as they handed over a charity painting to an international children's foundation. Nathan sat motionless, his heart tearing. It was the first time in years he saw his sons. Older, smarter, self-assured. They looked like him, but they didn't belong to him anymore. He couldn't bear it. One rainy afternoon, he went to their school and stood quietly at the edge of the playground, waiting for the final bell to ring. Luca came out first. When he saw Nathan, he froze. "Luca," Nathan called, voice raw. "It's Dad." The boy stood still for a moment, then turned away without a word. Elias followed. Nathan stepped forward. "Can I have a minute with you?" The boy looked him in the eye. "You're the one who left our mom while we were still inside her, aren't you?" Nathan swallowed. I was wrong, deeply wrong." Elias nodded, not in anger, but in quiet sadness. "We're okay," he said. "Mom taught us to forgive, but forgiving doesn't mean letting you back in." Then they walked away, leaving Nathan alone in the rain. That night, he opened an old box tucked away in the closet, filled with the earliest sketches he'd made with Isabel back when they dreamed of a future together. Her note still marked the margins. "We'll build this together, now," daggers in his memory. He couldn't go back. He couldn't unsay the things he'd said, undo the things he'd done. He once had a family. He had called that woman nothing, only to realize now that he was the one the world would forget. The punishment hadn't come from a courtroom. It came in the form of two sons turning away, and the realization that the woman he threw away had become everything he could never touch again. Nathan didn't give up. After being turned away in the rain, he kept returning, week after week, standing quietly outside the school gates, keeping his distance just to see his sons from afar. He didn't push, didn't call out. He simply waited. One time, he left a box of cookies outside their classroom with a note. "I'm not asking for anything, just hope you enjoy these." Luca was the first to soften. One rainy afternoon, seeing Nathan drenched, he ran out and handed him an old umbrella. "You don't have to be wet, Dad," he said quietly, before hurrying off. Elias took longer, but eventually he looked back, not with anger, but with a gaze that said, "We don't hate you anymore, but we're not ready to call you family." Nathan reached out to Isabel too, not to ask for a second chance, just to say, sorry, a real apology with no expectations. They met at the cafe they used to visit years ago. She arrived 10 minutes late, not because she doubted, but because she needed time to brace herself. "I don't expect forgiveness," Nathan said, voice low, "but I want you to know I'm no longer the man who said those things." Isabel didn't respond. She just stared out the window, hands gripping her coffee as if letting go would break her. Inside her, a silent storm raged. She still loved him, a love that didn't vanish overnight, that couldn't be erased even after being trampled. But every time she looked into his eyes, she saw herself, back then, standing in the kitchen, holding her belly while her heart shattered. "I survived," she whispered, her voice tight, but the scars never left. Nathan nodded. He didn't beg, just listened, and she realized that was the biggest change of all. Time passed. Isabel allowed him to attend a few school events, the art fair, award ceremonies, field day. Luca and Elias slowly learned to say Dad without it feeling heavy, but they also knew Mom was the one who had always been there, from the beginning. Once, Isabel caught Nathan standing behind the school stage, quietly taking pictures of the boys, then deleting them, as if he didn't feel entitled to keep anything not truly his. She cried, not from weakness, but because she understood something painful. Some people regret with all their heart, but not everyone deserves to return. She had forgiven, she had released the anger, but she was no longer the same Isabel who once handed over her heart to someone not ready to hold it. Now they were no longer enemies, no longer strangers, but not quite a family, not yet. Time passed, like watercolor paintings fading in the sun. Luca and Aaliyah stepped into adolescence. Isabel expanded Cruz Creations into a community arts academy, offering free classes for underprivileged children. Her name appeared on magazine covers, but she kept her quiet life. Balcony flowers and peaceful dinners with her sons. Nathan, now working steadily at a small nonprofit, remained a distant presence in his sons' lives. He never intruded. He came only when invited. He learned to love from the space Isabel allowed. One day, Luca handed Isabel a letter. "Dad wrote this. Maybe you should read it." In the letter, Nathan asked for nothing. He simply wrote, "Thank you for letting me make amends, not to return, but to become someone our children can be proud to call their father." Isabel read it, folded it away, said nothing. But that night, she cried. Not from regret, but from the quiet ache of realizing some people do grow after everything's too late. That afternoon, Isabel sat on a bench with her boys. She had felt this day coming, quietly, slowly, like a tide drawing closer. She had thought about it in the silence after the boys slept, in the mornings when Nathan stood at a distance watching with eyes full of quiet remorse. She still loved him. That part never truly left. But sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes love meant letting go, not for bitterness, but for peace. When Elias finally said, "I think we should tell Dad," she simply nodded. Her heart felt light, not because she'd forgotten, but because this time she was the one choosing how the story ended. They met Nathan on an old wooden bridge, where the sunset bled slowly into the water, as if the sky itself was painting a farewell. Nathan stood waiting, a quiet smile, his hands uncertain. Isabel was the first to speak. "We want to thank you for changing, for staying, for doing what's right, even when no one asked you to." Nathan didn't speak. Her voice stung, not angry, but no longer warm. Lucas stepped forward, placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "You're our dad, and we'll always be grateful you tried, but it's time we each walk our own path." Elias added, "It's not because you don't deserve us, but because Mom gave us everything, and she deserves a life not bound by what used to be." Nathan nodded, eyes glassy. "I understand. I know I can't ask for anything more." Isabel stepped forward and pulled a drawing from her bag. It was a sketch of this bridge, her and the boys on one side, the sunset stretching across the water. "Keep this," she said, voice gentle but firm. "It's not to remind you of me. It's to remind you that even broken things can be beautiful, for a moment." He took the drawing, his hands shaking. All he could whisper was, "Thank you for everything." The family embraced one last time, this time with Nathan in their arms too. Then they walked away, Isabel holding her son's hands, turning toward the other side of the bridge. Nathan remained still, didn't call out, didn't follow. He only watched their figures fade into the golden haze, like 3 soft brushstrokes dissolving into canvas. The sun slipped beneath the horizon, as if even the sky was grieving what had ended. A story, a connection, a love once held close. It ended, not in anger, not in regret, but in the quiet, bittersweet ache of letting go. And though they each walked away from the same bridge, only one of them would carry the memory, alone. Nathan stood alone on the bridge long after they were gone. The sketch Isabel had given him trembled in his hands, edges softening in the wind. Slowly he sat down on the worn wooden railing, pulled a pen from his pocket, and turned the drawing over. On the blank side, with hands that had once built empires but now only knew silence, he began to draw. 2 boys, standing at a distance looking back. He didn't know if they'd ever turn around again, but he would wait. Quietly, humbly, on some father's return by force. And that memory was the only place he still belonged.